and the light you carry forces them to see the shadows they've been running from. Today, we're going to break down why shame becomes the silent punishment they can't escape. More importantly, how to turn your pain into a quiet, unshakable power that sets you free while they remain trapped in their own prison. When someone avoids you after they've wronged you, it's tempting to believe it's about you, your presence, your success, your supposed intimidation factor. But the truth is far simpler and far more revealing. They're not running from you, they're running from themselves. Think about it. If you genuinely believed you'd acted with integrity, would you need to look away when someone walked into the room? Would you need to pretend you didn't see them? No. You could look them in the eye without hesitation. You could stand there without a knot in your stomach. But when someone mistreats you, lies to you, betrays you, disrespects you, they create a fracture inside themselves. And every time they see you, that fracture reopens. You become a living reminder of their lowest moment, a walking reflection of a chapter they wish they could erase. It's not fear of you, it's fear of the truth. Here's the thing about shame. It's not just I did something bad that's guilt. Shame is deeper. Shame whispers, there's something wrong with me, and that's what makes it unbearable. Imagine for a second that you're holding up a mirror, not a physical one, but a mirror made of truth. Every time they look at you, they see not just what they did, but what that says about who they are. That's the part they can't handle, because it forces them to face a question they've been avoiding. If I could do something that cruel to someone good, what does that say about me? The mirror effect. Picture this. You're at a gathering. You haven't seen them in months. You're chatting with friends, laughing, being your authentic self. And then across the room you catch them seeing you. They freeze for a second. Their expression changes almost imperceptibly. And then they turn away, pretending to be so busy with something else. They aren't avoiding you because you're dangerous. They're avoiding the emotional collision they know will happen the moment they truly see you. Because when they see you, they see the proof. Proof that you survived what they did. Proof that you're stronger now than before. Proof that they failed the character test when it mattered most. Shame is a weight they can't drop. Most people think avoidance is strength. They'll convince themselves they're moving on, that they're protecting their peace. But avoidance isn't peace, it's a mask. Behind that mask is a weight that doesn't go away. Shame doesn't fade with time, it festers. It shows up in quiet moments late at night, during a long drive, in the middle of a conversation when a stray thought slips in. And when they see you, it's like that weight triples instantly. The mind has a way of replaying the past in high definition when confronted with the truth, and you simply existing, simply breathing, are the trigger that makes their mental projector run. Real-life example. Think about the co-worker who took credit for your work. At first, they felt smug, maybe even justified. But months later, when you've advanced in your career through skill and resilience, and they've stagnated, they can't look you in the eye. Not because they think you'll confront them, but because every success you achieve silently erases the lie they told themselves, that you weren't capable. Or think about the friend who betrayed your trust and spread rumors. They'll avoid events they know you'll attend, or suddenly leave early when you arrive. Why? because seeing you happy and unbothered forces them to admit, even if only to themselves, that they tried to damage someone who never meant them harm. The power of your presence. Here's where your emotional intelligence comes in. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to demand an explanation. You don't need to do anything but keep living in alignment with your highest values, your calm, your composure, your refusal to play their games. It's all part of what makes your presence unbearable to them. Because they expected you to break, they counted on it. And instead, you became stronger. Your very existence now dismantles the narrative they use to sleep at night. They may tell themselves you were too sensitive, too dramatic, or difficult to deal with. But every time they see you thriving, that story cracks a little more, and one day, it might shatter completely. Why this matters for you? Understanding what they're really running from gives you back your power. It reminds you that their distance isn't a rejection of your worth, it's an avoidance of their own reflection. You are not the villain in this story. You are the mirror they can't face, the standard they failed to meet, the living proof that integrity survives betrayal. So the next time someone avoids you, remember, it's not fear of confrontation, it's not indifference, it's fear of exposure. And that fear that's theirs to carry, not yours. We live in a world where people will do almost anything to protect their image. They'll spin stories, rewrite history, and surround themselves with people who'll never question their version of events. But there's one thing they can't hide: the language of their silence. When someone wrongs you and then disappears, it's not just space or moving on, it's avoidance. And avoidance is a form of communication. It says, I can't face you because if I do, I'll have to face what I've done. Avoidance is not peace, it's proof. You see, real peace has nothing to hide from. Peace can meet you in the street, shake your hand, and look you dead in the eye. But avoidance crosses the street before you can get close. It pretends to scroll through a phone. It hides behind fake busyness. That's not peace. That's fear. Fear that standing in your presence will strip away the lies they've told themselves. Fear that one look from you will unravel the fragile story they've been using to sleep at night. And here's the truth. They won't say out loud. Their silence isn't about not wanting drama. It's about not wanting accountability. The silent apology. Silence can be louder than any words. Think about it. If they truly believed they were right, wouldn't they have no problem defending themselves? Wouldn't they look you in the eye and stand on their actions? But they don't. They vanish. They go quiet. They remove themselves from anywhere you might be. That's not indifference. That's a silent admission. I know what I did, and I can't bring myself to face it. Sometimes, the apology you've been waiting for won't come in words. It will come in the form of absence. In the way they avoid you, like your presence is a spotlight shining directly on their conscience. A real-life snapshot. Picture this. You're walking into a coffee shop. It's a place you've been going to for years. At the corner table, you see someone who once betrayed you in a way you'll never forget. They see you too, but instead of saying hello, they fumble with their cup. Suddenly remember, they have somewhere to be, and walk out. You didn't exchange a single word, but in that moment, you heard everything you needed to hear. Their body language screamed it. I can't sit here and act like nothing happened. I can't handle being around you. because you are proof of a truth I'm not ready to admit. That exit, that's the confession. That's the I'm sorry they don't have the courage to say. Why silence hurts them more than you at first. Their silence might sting. It can feel like indifference. Like you never mattered, but the longer you live, the more you'll realize silence eats at the guilty far more than it ever harms the innocent. Why? Because guilt doesn't sleep well. It shows up in flashes, a memory triggered by a song, a smell, a random conversation. And when they think of you, they're not remembering the version of themselves they post online. They're remembering the one who failed you. Silence is not absence. It's a weight. It's like carrying a backpack full of stones everywhere you go, except the stones are moments of truth they've been avoiding for years. Your role in this. Here's where emotional intelligence shifts everything. You don't need to force a confrontation. You don't need to send one last message. You don't need to corner them into talking, because every time you keep living your life, keep growing, keep embodying self-worth and inner peace, you amplify that silence into a deafening roar in their own head. Your dignity becomes the mirror they can't look into. Your boundaries become the walls they can't climb. They expected you to fight, to beg, to demand closure, and instead, you walked away. And that choice, that's why they can't face you. The Stoic view. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." That's what your silence represents. Not weakness, not defeat, but discipline, the kind of self-mastery that turns your absence into their accountability. And here's the irony: they thought staying silent was protecting them from pain, but in reality, it's the very thing keeping their pain alive. There's a reason they can't stand to be in the same room with you, and it's not because you've become hostile or dangerous. It's because you've become a mirror, not the kind you hang on a wall, but the kind made of truth. When they see you, they see themselves, stripped of excuses, stripped of justifications, stripped of the false narrative they've been clinging to. And here's the uncomfortable part for them: mirrors don't lie. Why your presence feels like exposure. The human mind is a master storyteller. When people do something wrong, they almost never see themselves as the villain. They'll rewrite the script, tweak the details, and bend reality until they can live with their choices. But you break that illusion, not because you're trying to, not because you're saying anything, simply because your life now contradicts the story they tell themselves. They said you were weak, but now you're stronger than ever. They said you were overreacting, but your calm proves otherwise. They said you were dependent on them, but now you're thriving without their presence. Every one of your wins is a crack in their self-made version of the truth. When truth walks into the room, imagine you're at a dinner party. You're talking, laughing, completely at ease. Then, across the room, you catch sight of them. They lock eyes with you for half a second, and in that instant, you can see the flicker of something in their expression: discomfort, regret, maybe even shame. It's not because you've done anything to provoke them. It's because in that moment, they see the one thing they've worked so hard to avoid: the unfiltered truth of who they were when they mistreated you. You are the physical embodiment of their moral failure, and standing in front of you feels like standing under a spotlight they never agreed to step into. The mirror they can't smash. The beauty and the curse of the mirror effect is that they can't break it. They can avoid you. They can hide. They can even talk badly about you to others in an attempt to distort the reflection, but deep down, they know the truth doesn't change. It's like trying to shatter your reflection by breaking every mirror in the house, only to find out that no matter where you go, the reflection follows you. You are that reflection. You're not chasing them. But they can't outrun what you represent. Real-life example. Think of an ex-partner who betrayed you. Convinced themselves they had valid reasons, and maybe even painted themselves as the victim. At first, they felt justified, but then they see you a year later smiling, confident, at peace, and in that moment, they feel something sink in their stomach, because the story they've been telling themselves no longer holds up. Or picture a former friend who tried to undermine you in front of others. They've convinced themselves you were too sensitive. Then they see you succeeding in the very areas they once told you you'd fail. That's the mirror. That's the undeniable proof that their judgment and their character was flawed. Why it hurts them more than any confrontation. A verbal confrontation can be dismissed. They can tell themselves they're just angry. They're exaggerating. They'll get over it. But the mirror you hold up, that's different. It's silent. It doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It just exists. And because it's silent, it can't be debated. It's not an opinion. It's evidence. That's why they squirm in your presence, because there's nothing they can say to make the reflection kinder. The reflection is what it is. Your power lies in restraint. Here's the Stoic truth. You don't have to force the mirror in front of them. Life does that for you. All you have to do is keep becoming the best version of yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Your growth is the mirror. Your calm is the mirror. Your refusal to seek revenge is the mirror. Every choice you make towards self-respect and inner peace is another polish on that glass, making the reflection sharper, clearer, and harder for them to ignore. From emotional intelligence to quiet confidence. This is where emotional intelligence becomes your armor. You know you don't need their acknowledgement. You don't need them to admit what you already know. Your self-worth doesn't hinge on their recognition. The mirror effect isn't about punishing them, it's about honoring yourself. And ironically, that's what makes it so powerful. Because while they're stuck, avoiding the reflection, you're free to keep moving forward. Remember this. The mirror effect doesn't require you to lift a finger against them. Your existence as someone who survived, healed, and rose higher than they expected, that's enough. It's the truth they can't face. And the proof you don't need to say a single word. If you want to understand why they can't face you anymore, you have to understand the difference between guilt and shame. On the surface, they sound similar. Both are uncomfortable. Both come after a wrong. But in reality, they are two very different beasts, and only one of them is powerful enough to make someone avoid you for years. Guilt, I did something wrong. Guilt is about behavior. It says, I made a mistake. I did something bad. Guilt can be heavy. Yes, but it's also fixable. If you feel guilty, you can apologize. You can take responsibility. You can repair the damage and move on. Guilt is about the act, and because it focuses on the act, Guilt can be resolved if you have the courage to face it. Example: you accidentally step on someone's foot. You feel bad. You say, "I'm sorry." You step off their foot. The moment passes. That's guilt. It's sharp. But it's temporary, and most importantly, it's survivable. Shame: there's something wrong with me. Shame, on the other hand, is identity deep. It says, I didn't just do something bad. I am bad. Shame doesn't attack the act. It attacks the self, and because it's tied to identity, it's far harder to escape. It's not a moment you can fix with an apology. It's a reflection you can't bear to look at. Here's the dangerous thing about shame when it's triggered. Most people don't lean in to face it. They run. They bury it under distractions, lies, new relationships, overwork, or even fake confidence. But all it takes is one encounter with you to bring it roaring back to the surface. Why shame burns longer, guilt fades when the wrong is acknowledged and repaired. Shame lingers because it doesn't rely on anyone else to exist. It lives inside their self-image. That's why, when they see you, their stomach drops. You don't just remind them of what they did. You remind them of who they were when they did it. And here's the part they'll never say out loud. That version of themselves wasn't strong, wasn't kind, and wasn't honorable. It was small, weak, dishonorable. Real-life contrast. Let's make this real. Imagine a coworker once forgot to forward you an important email. That's guilt. They made a mistake, and they can fix it. Now imagine that same coworker deliberately sabotaged your project so they could take the credit. That's not just guilt. That's shame. Because the act wasn't an accident, it revealed something about their character, and no matter how they try to justify it, deep down, they know it shows a part of themselves they don't want to admit exists. Why shame traps them? The thing about shame is that it demands self-confrontation, and most people don't have the courage for that. To resolve shame, you'd have to look yourself in the mirror and say, I did something cruel to someone who didn't deserve it. And that means, in that moment, I was not a good person. That's not easy. In fact, for some, it feels impossible. So they avoid the mirror. They avoid you. They avoid anything that reminds them of the truth. In their mind, avoidance equals escape. But in reality, avoidance only tightens the chains. Every time they dodge you, they reinforce the belief that facing you would be unbearable, which makes the shame even stronger the next time. Your advantage. This is where your self-worth and inner peace give you the upper hand. You're not playing the same game. You've already done the hard work of facing your pain, healing, and moving forward. They, on the other hand, are stuck in an emotional holding cell of their own making. They can't face you because they can't face themselves. And every time you walk into a room with quiet confidence, you turn the key on their cell door, not to set them free, but to remind them it's locked from the inside. The Stoic perspective. From a Stoic lens, guilt can be a teacher. Shame, however, is a prison. Marcus Aurelius might put it this way: if a wrong can be corrected, correct it. If it cannot, let it teach you, but never let it corrupt your nature. You've chosen not to let their wrong corrupt yours. You've turned what could have been your prison into your training ground. They've done the opposite, turning what could have been a moment of accountability into a lifelong sentence. The final truth about shame. Here's what it comes down to. Guilt says, I owe you an apology. Shame says, I can't even be near you without falling apart inside. And that's why they avoid you. Not because you're dangerous, but because you are the living embodiment of a truth they cannot bear to face. So the next time you see them glance away, change the subject, or slip quietly out of the room. Don't misinterpret it as power on their part. It's not power. It's shame, and it's eating them alive far more than you could ever see. When someone betrays you, disrespects you, or tries to break you, they expect a certain reaction. They either want you to collapse so they can feel powerful, or lash out so they can feel justified. What they don't expect and what they can't handle is steadfastness. Why they count on you to break people who mistreat others often operate on a predictable psychological cycle. They strike, and then they wait. They watch to see if the damage sticks. If you fall apart, they win. If you blow up in anger, they twist the story and make you the villain. But when you remain calm, composed, and unshaken, you ruin their script. You don't give them the satisfaction of watching you self-destruct, and that disruption is more devastating than any confrontation could ever be. Steadfastness is not passivity. Some mistake steadfastness for weakness. They think, if I'm not reacting, I'm letting them get away with it. But steadfastness isn't passive. It's active self-mastery. It's the deliberate choice to protect your energy, preserve your dignity, and hold your ground without lowering yourself to their level. That's emotional intelligence in action, knowing that your peace is worth more than proving a point. The silent disarmament. Think of it like this. Every interaction is a tug of war. They pull, expecting you to pull back. But instead, you drop the rope. The game ends instantly. And now they're left holding the rope, realizing they can't control you anymore. Your steadfastness is the moment they realize they've lost influence over your emotions, your choices, and your identity. Real life example. Let's say you had a close friend who betrayed your trust. They expected you to confront them in rage, to send long, emotional messages, to demand answers. Instead, you simply step back. You stop engaging. You keep building your life. You post photos of yourself smiling, working on your goals, spending time with people who value you. You're not doing it to provoke them. You're doing it because you're truly moving forward. But to them, every image, every update, every sign of your progress feels like a quiet statement. You didn't break me. Why steadfastness magnifies their shame. Here's the irony: the more stable you are, the more unstable they feel. Your refusal to spiral proves something they don't want to accept, that they underestimated you. They thought you needed them. They thought you'd crumble without them. They thought their betrayal would define you. Instead, your calm composure forces them to face the reality that the only thing they damaged was their own integrity. You're still here, still standing, still building. The Stoic principle at play in Stoic philosophy There's a core principle. You cannot control what others do, but you can always control your response. Steadfastness is the embodiment of that principle. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That's what you've done. You've revoked their power over you. Steadfastness and self-worth. Steadfastness is rooted in self-worth. You know who you are. You know what you deserve. You know that no one's actions, no matter how cruel, can define your value. That's why you don't need revenge to feel whole. You don't need to win an argument to feel justified. Your worth isn't up for debate. And that's what makes your presence so intimidating to someone who tried to diminish it. How steadfastness protects your inner peace when you refuse to be baited. You protect your most valuable asset, your inner peace. You stop giving them free rent in your mind. You stop replaying their words and actions in an endless loop, and that quiet stability becomes the sharpest contrast to their inner chaos. Because while you've moved on, they're still tangled in the emotional mess they created. What they see when they look at you now, every time they see you, they're reminded of two things. 1, you didn't break. 2, they lost the privilege of standing beside someone who doesn't break. That realization cuts deeper than any insult you could throw at them. It's why they can't look you in the eye. It's why they avoid you. It's why they stay silent, because your steadfastness tells a story they can't rewrite. Your takeaway steadfastness is your silent weapon. It's not about proving them wrong with words. It's about proving them wrong with your life. It's about showing, through your actions and your growth, that they have no control over your path. And in the end, that's the power they never wanted you to have, but can never take away now. Time has a way of healing many wounds, but shame is not one of them. If left unaddressed, it doesn't fade. It festers. It becomes a slow, quiet corrosion that eats at a person's self-image, no matter how many years pass. And when someone has wronged you deeply, that shame isn't just a memory, it's a living presence that follows them into every season of their life. Shame ages. Poorly guilt can mellow over time if there's genuine remorse and accountability. Shame, however, gets heavier. Why? Because every year they carry it without facing it. The harder it becomes to confront, it's like an unpaid debt. The longer they avoid it, the more interest it collects, and the moment they see you, all that accumulated weight comes crashing down at once. Why it stays with them? Shame lingers because it's tied to identity. It's not, "I made a bad choice back then." It's, "I was, and maybe still am, the kind of person who could do that." They can distract themselves for a while. New jobs, new relationships, new hobbies. But those are surface changes. Deep down, nothing's shifted. The moment life gets quiet, the truth starts whispering again. A decade later. Imagine this: 10 years pass. You've built a life you're proud of, a career, meaningful relationships, personal peace. You bump into them by chance at an airport or a wedding. To you, it's a neutral moment. You feel no anger, no need to reopen old wounds, but to them, it's like someone pressed play on a video they've been trying to delete for a decade. They remember the words they said, the betrayal they committed, the way they tried to diminish you, and here you are living proof that they failed to define you. That reminder can be more punishing than anything you could ever say. The mind's replay button. The human mind is wired to protect self-image. That's why people create justifications for bad behavior to avoid the crushing weight of seeing themselves as immoral or cruel. But here's the flaw. Those justifications are fragile. When they see you thriving, every defense they've built up starts to crack. They can't say, "It wasn't that bad," when you clearly had to rebuild your life afterward. They can't say, "You were too sensitive," when you've become stronger, calmer, and more self-assured than ever. Your presence triggers the replay of their actions, and this time, there's no way to mute the sound. The physical toll shame isn't just emotional, it's physical. It shows up in tightened shoulders, nervous, laughter, darting eyes. It can create stress, insomnia, even health issues. When it festers long enough, when they hear your name, their body reacts before their mind does. A knot in the stomach, a quickened heartbeat, a subtle panique. That's not fear of you. That's the long-term weight of carrying something they've never had the courage to put down. Your role in their ongoing burden. Here's the part you need to understand for your own peace. You're not responsible for lifting that weight for them. You don't have to offer them a shortcut to closure. You don't need to grant them access to explain themselves if they haven't earned it. That's where your psychological boundaries come in. Protecting your space doesn't make you cold, it makes you wise. You know that someone who carried this shame for years without trying to make it right is unlikely to suddenly change overnight. From their perspective, they may try to avoid places you go. They may stop mutual friends from mentioning your name. They may even pretend not to notice you in public. But avoidance doesn't erase the truth. It's just a temporary escape, one that gets shorter every time, because even if they manage to dodge you in person, they can't dodge the thought of you. They can't dodge the reality that somewhere out there, the person they wronged is living with freedom and dignity while they're still shackled to a version of themselves they despise. Why time makes it worse? Here's the paradox: they might hope time will soften your memory of what happened. But instead, time tends to sharpen it, not in your mind, but in theirs. Every year they don't face it is another year they prove to themselves they're too weak to confront the truth. And that realization compounds the shame. They're not just ashamed of what they did back then. They're ashamed of the fact that they've been running ever since. The Stoic takeaway. From a Stoic perspective, the weight of shame is the natural consequence of moral failure left unresolved. It's not your job to lessen it. It's not your responsibility to carry any part of it. Your responsibility is to keep walking in truth, self-worth, and inner peace, because every step you take forward widens the gap between you and the version of them that harmed you. Remember this: the long-term weight of shame doesn't need your participation to exist. It builds on its own. It festers on its own. And in the end, it becomes the very thing that keeps them from ever truly being free while you live unshackled. When someone wrongs you, they often expect your reaction to be immediate, explosive, and emotional. They want you to lash out, lose your composure, and show the world that they still have power over your state of mind. But here's the shift that changes everything: emotional intelligence. The moment you master it, their influence over you collapses. What emotional intelligence really is? Emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing your feelings or pretending you're not hurt. It's about recognizing your emotions, understanding where they come from, and choosing the most effective response, not the most reactive one. When you respond instead of react, you create a psychological boundary they can't cross. They can no longer manipulate you through provocation, guilt trips, or drama, because your center is no longer up for grabs. Why? It disarms them. Think about it. Their strategy depends on pulling you into chaos. If they can get you angry, they can call you unstable. If they can make you beg, they can call you needy. If they can make you retaliate, they can play the victim. But when you remain calm, grounded, and clear, you take away every card in their deck. You're not giving them the reaction they rehearsed for, and that unsettles them more than any argument ever could. The power of the pause. Emotional intelligence gives you what I call the power of the pause. It's that moment where you feel the surge of emotion, the urge to clap back, to defend yourself, to set the record straight, and you choose not to hand them that power. Instead, you breathe, you think, you choose your next move with precision, not impulse. This pause is lethal to manipulators because it removes their ability to predict and control you. Real-life example. Imagine you're at a family gathering and someone who wronged you decides to make a passive-aggressive comment, hoping to trigger you in front of others. Old, you might have taken the bait, hot and defensive, and fed their narrative. But emotionally intelligent you simply smile, let the comment pass without reaction, and redirect the conversation. They're left hanging in the awkward silence of their failed attempt. Everyone else notices their pettiness, and you remain unshaken, reinforcing your self-worth and inner peace. Emotional intelligence and self-worth. Here's the connection most people miss. Self-worth is the foundation of emotional intelligence. When you know your value, you don't feel the need to prove it in every interaction. You don't take every slight personally because you understand that other people's actions are a reflection of them, not you. This is what Stoics call indifference to the opinions of the unwise. It's not arrogance. It's clarity, the ability to see that your worth isn't dependent on external validation or temporary conflict. The ripple effect on them. When you operate from emotional intelligence, you create a contrast they can't ignore. They're reactive, you're composed. They're fueled by ego, you're guided by principle. They're stuck in the past, you're building the future. Every interaction with you becomes a mirror of their own emotional instability, and that mirror is more confronting than any direct criticism. Emotional intelligence as a long-term strategy. This isn't just about winning a single interaction. It's about adopting a high-performance mindset for your emotional life. You're training yourself to respond in ways that serve your long-term peace, not your short-term ego. When you keep doing this, something powerful happens. You stop being someone they can play. You stop being predictable. You stop being accessible to manipulation. And once they realize they can't reach you emotionally, they either change their approach or they disappear entirely. Either outcome is a win for you. Protecting your inner peace. Think of your inner peace like a fortress. Every time you react impulsively to provocation, you're opening the gates and letting the enemy in. But when you practice emotional intelligence, you're reinforcing the walls. You're making sure only the right influences have access to your mind and heart. This is where psychological boundaries come in, not just physical or conversational limits, but emotional ones. You decide who gets to affect you and how much. The Stoic perspective, Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Emotional intelligence is the modern version of that truth. It's the ability to choose strength over spite, clarity over chaos, and discipline over drama. You may not be able to control their actions, but you can always control your response, and that's where your real power lies. Remember this. When they can no longer control your emotions, they've lost the only weapon they had. Your emotional intelligence turns every encounter into a quiet victory, not because you won the moment, but because you never gave them the power to define it in the first place. If emotional intelligence is the art of controlling your reaction, psychological boundaries are the structure that makes that control possible. They're not walls to keep everyone out. They're gates you control, deciding who enters, how close they get, and how much influence they have over you. And when someone has wronged you, these boundaries become your invisible armor. They can see you, but they can't touch you, not your peace, not your self-worth, not your future. What psychological boundaries really mean? Boundaries aren't about telling people what to do. They're about telling yourself what you will and won't allow in your life. They are lines you draw in your mind that say, this is where my responsibility ends and yours begins. This is how far I'll let you into my emotional space. This is what I will not tolerate, no matter who you are. When you have these in place, you stop being vulnerable to every mood, opinion, or manipulation that comes your way. Why boundaries make you hard to face when someone has hurt you? The easiest way for them to reassert control is to re-enter your emotional world. They might try to guilt you, charm you, or use nostalgia to pull you back in. But when your boundaries are strong, those attempts bounce right off. You're no longer swayed by empty apologies. You're not seduced by promises they'll do better. You're not interested in reopening old doors that lead to the same rooms you've already escaped. That's when they start avoiding you, because every failed attempt to break your boundaries reminds them they no longer have access to the power they once held. The unspoken message boundaries send. A strong boundary says, without a single word, I value myself enough to protect myself. And here's the thing. That message doesn't just repel toxic people, it unsettles them. They can't handle the reality that their behavior no longer works on you. Your boundaries strip them of their favorite tools, guilt, manipulation, and control. Real-life example. Let's say a former friend who betrayed you suddenly reaches out, acting as if nothing happened. Old you might have engaged, asked why, and given them space to justify themselves. But the new you, with psychological boundaries, politely declines the invitation to re-enter that dynamic. Maybe you respond briefly, without opening the door for deeper conversation, or maybe you don't respond at all. Either way, the effect is the same. They're confronted with the truth that your access to them is no longer automatic. Boundaries protect your inner peace. Without boundaries, every person's opinion, mood, or action has a direct line to your mental and emotional state. With boundaries, you choose whose voice matters, whose energy you allow near you, and which interactions deserve your time. This is how you preserve inner peace. It's not about isolation, it's about discernment, the spiritual discipline of knowing what nourishes you and what drains you. Why boundaries strengthen self-worth. People with low self-worth often believe they have to accept whatever treatment they're given, as if saying no will make them unlovable. But when you build and honor your boundaries, you send yourself a powerful message: I am worth protecting. And when you live by that standard, people who once crossed the line without consequences suddenly find themselves locked out, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. The ripple effect on them: strong boundaries don't just keep you safe, they make your presence more intimidating to those who've wronged you. Why? Because boundaries are proof you've learned from the past. They show you're not the same person they could manipulate or take for granted. Every interaction becomes a reminder: the access you once had is gone forever. And for someone still carrying shame, that's a reality they'd rather avoid than face. The Stoic perspective. Stoics understood boundaries, even if they didn't use the word. Epictetus taught, keep your will in harmony with nature. Let others act as they will. It is not within your power to control them. But let nothing in that is harmful to your soul. That's the essence of a psychological boundary. You can't control their actions, but you can absolutely control their access to your mind, heart, and spirit. Your takeaway boundaries aren't a punishment. They're a declaration of self-respect. They tell the world, I choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and dignity over drama. When you live like that, you don't need to block everyone who's ever hurt you. Most of them will block themselves, because your strength reflects back to them what they've lost. When people think of weapons, they imagine something loud, forceful, or aggressive. But the most disarming weapons you can ever carry are invisible self-worth and inner peace. They can't be stolen, faked, or argued against. And once you have them, anyone who's wronged you will feel their sting without you lifting a finger. Why self-worth changes the entire game. Self-worth is knowing your value without needing someone else to confirm it. It's the unshakable belief that you deserve respect, dignity, and fairness, and that you'll walk away from anything that doesn't honor that. When you truly know your worth, you stop negotiating with people who mistreat you. You no longer seek closure from those incapable of giving it. You stop performing for their approval, because you understand your value isn't up for debate. And here's the shift that rattles them. They can no longer define you. Their words, their opinions, their attempts to label you as too much or not enough bounce right off. That's terrifying for someone who once held power over your self-image. Inner peace as the unreachable prize. If self-worth is your shield, inner peace is the treasure they can't touch. Inner peace means you're no longer living in reaction to the past. You're not replaying the betrayal on a loop. You're not burning energy plotting revenge. You've moved on not because you've forgotten, but because you've chosen to protect your present. And this is where the discomfort sets in for them. They expected their actions to leave you restless, bitter, and stuck. Instead, You're calm, content, and building a life they can't disturb. The psychological impact on them. When they see you standing in your self-worth, radiating inner peace, it forces a painful contrast. You're thriving, they're stuck. You're calm, they're unsettled. You've risen, they've avoided growth. That contrast isn't just uncomfortable, it's humiliating, because it proves, without a single word, that they didn't destroy you. They only revealed your strength. A real-life snapshot. Think of someone who tried to undermine your confidence, maybe a toxic boss, an ex, or even a so-called friend. They were sure you'd crumble without them. Then, one day, they see you again smiling, self-assured, carrying yourself with quiet confidence. You don't gloat. You don't throw their actions in their face. You simply exist in a way that shows you've reclaimed your life. That moment hits them harder than any speech ever could, because it's proof their version of the story no longer matters. The connection to emotional intelligence. Self-worth and inner peace are built on emotional intelligence. You can't have either if you're constantly chasing external validation or reacting to every provocation. Emotional intelligence teaches you to pause, to evaluate whether something truly deserves your energy, and to walk away when it doesn't. That's why your peace feels so untouchable, because it's guarded by the discipline to not let just anyone inside your emotional world. Spiritual discipline and the power to let go. It takes spiritual discipline to release the need to win in the eyes of others. Your win isn't in proving them wrong, it's in proving to yourself that you can live fully without their approval or involvement. This is where inner peace becomes a spiritual practice. You stop obsessing over their journey. You stop measuring your worth by their acknowledgement. You start living in alignment with your own values, and that alignment becomes your greatest protection. Why these weapons are unstoppable? You can't argue with self-worth. You can't disrupt inner peace without consent. And that's why these qualities are so threatening to someone who's wronged you. They can ignore your success. They can dismiss your achievements. But they can't deny the fact that you carry yourself differently, now that you're untouchable in a way you never were before. The Stoic perspective. Stoicism teaches that our happiness depends on our ability to control our mind, not the actions of others. Self-worth is knowing your value, regardless of outside opinion. Inner peace is the result of living in that truth every single day. Together, they form the invisible armor that makes you unshakable. Remember this, when you carry self-worth and inner peace, you don't have to prove anything. You are living proof. And that is the quiet, enduring victory they can't stand to witness, and the reason they'll keep looking away. In the end, everything boils down to this. You walked away stronger, and they're still living inside the cage they built for themselves. It's not a cage you put them in. It's not a punishment you handed out. It's the natural consequence of their own actions, a prison made of shame, regret, and avoidance. Their prison has no walls. You can't see it from the outside, but they carry it everywhere. The weight in their chest when your name comes up, the quick glance away when they see you in public, the sudden change in tone when a memory surfaces. It's not about fear of you physically. It's fear of the truth you represent. Their prison has no bars, but it's reinforced by every lie they told themselves. Every time they avoided accountability, every moment they chose pride over humility. You don't have to lock the door. Here's the irony. The door to that prison is always open. They could face the truth, apologize, and set themselves free. But that would require courage, the kind of courage they've been avoiding for years. Instead, they choose to stay inside, where they don't have to confront the version of themselves they become around you. That's why they can't face you, because you are living proof that they failed a test of character. And that proof will always be unbearable to them. Your freedom was hard-earned. Don't mistake your freedom for luck. You worked for it. You faced the pain head-on. You processed it. You rebuilt. You stopped chasing closure from people incapable of giving it. And instead you gave it to yourself. That's the high-performance mindset in action, refusing to let the past dictate your future, and investing in the kind of growth that no one can take away from you. Why they'll keep their distance. Some people think avoidance is indifference, but here, it's the opposite. If they truly felt nothing, they could face you without a problem. But their absence is not absence. It's avoidance that speaks louder than any words they'll ever say. Every time they choose to look away, it's another reminder to themselves, I haven't changed. I still can't face this. And that realization only deepens the trap they're in. Your presence is the reminder they can't erase. You don't need to call them out. You don't need to post cryptic quotes or drop subtle hints. Your life is the message. Every time you walk into a room, every time someone else praises your growth, every time you carry yourself with dignity, you become the reflection they can't escape. And the truth is, that reflection is too bright for them to look at directly because it illuminates everything they've been trying to hide. Why you don't need revenge. Revenge would mean tying your energy to theirs. It would mean centering your actions around proving them wrong, but you've already won a greater victory. The ability to live without needing their acknowledgement or approval. Your peace is your proof. Your self-worth is your statement. Your boundaries are your declaration that you've outgrown their reach. The Stoic closure. From a Stoic point of view, justice doesn't always arrive in public. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the balance of cause and effect. They planted the seed of their own shame the moment they mistreated you, and now they're the ones tending it, whether they want to or not. Meanwhile, you've planted seeds of growth, discipline, and clarity, and those are the seeds you water every day. The final truth. They're trapped not because of you, but because of who they chose to be. You're free because you chose differently. And every time they look away, every time they avoid your presence, they confirm the same thing. You rose. They stayed the same. Your job now isn't to make them see it. Your job is to keep walking forward, building a life so rich in self-worth, inner peace, and purpose that their absence barely registers, because at the end of the day, their silence is not your burden, it's their sentence, and your freedom. That's the life they'll never have until they face themselves. They may never say the words. They may never admit the truth. They may spend the rest of their lives rewriting the story to make themselves look better. But deep down, they know. And every time they avoid you, every time they look away, every time they vanish into silence, that's the confession you've been waiting for. You don't need their apology to close the chapter. You don't need revenge to balance the scales. Their shame is the justice Their avoidance is the proof.